Thank you so much for your time. And I want to introduce you to my viewers. This is Robert Baines. He's CEO and president of NATO Association of Canada, and also a member of Army, right? Or
correct.
How to say? Yeah, Canadian Army. So I have the most important question first, which is how is weather in Toronto?
It's actually absolutely beautiful. A little hot at the moment, but in Canada, of course, that is always welcome. We don't get that much hot weather, and when we do, we take advantage of it. So
okay, so it's getting more warmed up and happy, and people are coming out.
Yeah.
Great. For viewers who might not be my regular viewers, I wanted to say that these questions that I'm asking are the ones that is circulating in between Georgian people, and they are not representing any officials or any government or anything. I'm just a blogger and voicing Georgian people's questions, basically. And now I'm gonna switch to much more depressing stuff and difficult, sensitive questions. So first question is that I just heard that NATO Chief Jens Stoltenberg has warned that a war in Ukraine may last for years. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's a challenging question. First of all, I should just preface this by saying that I represent the NATO Association of Canada. We're arm's length from NATO itself, and our job is to make sure that Canadians know what NATO is and why it's important. And the same kind of message is appropriate for Georgians as well. I know that Georgia obviously has so much more on the line as far as actually being on the front line with Russia and having 20% of your territory under Russian control illegally at the moment. And it's trying to guess how long the conflict in Ukraine is going to go on for I might as well be a fortune teller, frankly. The Secretary General wants to prepare the allies for continued dedication. This is very much a diplomatic signal to the NATO members and NATO partners, and more importantly, perhaps, to Russia itself and to Mr. Putin, just signaling to them that they're in it for the long haul. And that is an important thought to get into everybody's minds. When this started on February 24th, so many allies kind of thought that either Ukraine would capitulate very quickly, or when the Russian army started encountering so many problems and getting bogged down in their invasion, people did think, well, maybe Russia will actually retreat, or there will be a coup, or who knows what. Now, it's anybody's guess. Mr. Putin could last 2 more days, 2 more months, 2 more years. It's very difficult to try to cast your mind to what might happen in the future. There could easily be a coup. There could easily be some other form of, I don't know, don't want to say revolution, but some form of change in the Russian government, forcing Mr. Putin to withdraw his troops, or at least take down more of the active measures that they're undertaking right now. So the Secretary General is just trying to prepare people for that eventuality. But in reality, it's very difficult to guess. Yeah.
Right here is the second question that I forgot to include, but it's about, like, do you think that there's actual threats to the nuclear anything, or is he just laughing per usual?
Well, again, you're going to hear me talk about balance
a
lot.
I know.
And NATO, its whole job is to protect its members. And that, of course, takes a lot of guesswork and preparation for what might happen. And a nuclear eventuality, Mr. Putin has already put it on the table. He has hinted at it. He has constantly mentioned a nuclear possibility. He's had members of his government, his spokespeople, mention it. So NATO has to be prepared for that kind of eventuality. Do I think it's going to happen? As a human, I pray it will not. But as someone who knows that Mr. Putin has already done the unthinkable and is already forcing his army to perpetrate absolute unspeakable things on Ukrainians, we have to think that he might be willing to use a tactical nuclear weapon on part of Ukraine. And if that does happen, NATO has not been explicit on what the response would be, but it would be significant. NATO could not let that happen without any kind of response. And the challenge here is that nuclear weapons have been a taboo for the entire world since Hiroshima and Nagasaki in the Second World War. Using them has just not been an option that was on the table, except in the most extreme of circumstances. So that would change things significantly. And NATO is very interested in making sure that it does as much as possible to be clear on its options and what it would do in a way to deter a nuclear strike of any kind.
Okay. Great. I hope so.
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Then I have a third question. So this third question is like, it's really not, it's not directed at you as much as I just want your opinion as someone who is expert in external, internal affairs and so on. So this third question is that in Ukraine, there has been some disappointment, so to say, in Georgian government that they haven't done enough in this crisis. And this was coming from even from like really top officials of Ukraine. Even though I do think I am not advocating or I'm not a lawyer of my own government, but in this situation, I think that they have done more than enough. I'm not sure if you had time to read those, but we were like first in out of 191 countries who sent the highest amount of humanitarian aid. And basically done whatever we could. And we also have refugees here and so on. Anyhow, they were still disappointed. So in terms of our situation, what do you think? What can country do? Was there anything we haven't done as a country, because we are clearly already in conflict with Russia? So what else could we have done?
Well, it's again, I'm going to be using the word balance again. It's clear that the Ukrainians and President Zelensky himself is constantly trying to push every country to do the most that they can to help Ukraine. And he's been very successful at that. It's kind of tough love most of the time. He says, we love what you've been sending. Thank you so much, but it's not good enough. The narrative that they've been very successfully arguing is that they are fighting for all of us. Everybody who has believed in the idea of territorial integrity, in the ideas of democracy and all of the wonderful liberal ideals, classically liberal ideals that the West, as it is, has been fighting for and developing for decades now. So he is trying to ride that line, that edge of demanding more from each country. And I mean, whether or not Georgia is doing enough, I don't think I can judge properly just from the few articles I've read. Obviously, your president and prime minister are trying to navigate that. They're commenting that all of the international sanctions are being observed by Georgia, i.e. the SWIFT banking system, et cetera, are not accessible to Russians. However, there are no specific national sanctions, I believe, being put forward by Georgia on Russia. So I think that kind of attempt to balance the Georgian national interest and Georgian economic health with a strong stance against the invasion, for instance, by co-sponsoring UN resolutions against the invasion, which Georgia has done. I think that every country has these kinds of give and takes, and it's just a matter of whether it's being effective. There are some comments that some of the oligarchs are able to take advantage of Georgia, are able to create new companies in Georgia just by using the online registration system. So I do not know the ins and outs of those claims, but every country has to have these choices and has to weave a course as to how they are going to be effective. And it's a lot of peer pressure. Not only
listen in that regard, sorry so in that regard, I want to counter argument here that Israel, for example, and some other countries I can't remember right now, do still regular business with Russia. Not just Israel, actually, many of them.
Yes.
And because and we are here occupied by them, and some countries are asking from us to do more than countries who are not occupied by Russia, right?
Yep.
So I think that's what I wanted opinion on. Like, are they maybe too tough on us somehow? Why? I don't know.
I think it's a matter of constant calibration. There's a lot that we're not seeing, I'm sure.
Of course.
Almost every government is trying to do its share in trying to stabilize this situation, to degrade the Russian military, and to help the Ukrainians. But Georgia has, a frozen conflict on its territory. So I'm not that surprised that it has to be a little more cautious than other countries. But at the same time, it is collaborative. All of the NATO members and NATO partners like Georgia are constantly pushing each other to do more. And every day, certainly Canada has constant updates on, okay, we're sanctioning new people. We are sending new equipment. We are sending new military kit. So there are many different ways to help. And I know that Canada and many other countries are going to be pushing Georgia, just as they're pushing other countries like Israel and India to do more and to be more forceful against Russia.
Yeah, I mean, India, they just they just went full on oil. We in Georgia see that Canada and US are helping Ukraine in this crisis quite well, and in fact Canada was one of the first to send military and financial aid, if I'm not mistaken. So but however, Georgian people are seeing that, and at least feeling this way, that large and capable European countries are not doing as much as they could in this crisis to help Ukraine, and which is prolonging the escalation. So what do you think on that?
Yes, I mean, we get criticized. Canada gets criticized for not doing enough as well, not doing it fast enough. I think most countries are having this debate within their own political arenas and in the public arena as well, which is why discussions like this one are so important to get through to citizens and to make them realize that this is we have to cheer each other on. We have to remind ourselves that these are absolutely horrific events that are happening in Ukraine, and every country has to do as much as possible. Canada has the largest Ukrainian diaspora in the world outside of Ukraine. So you can imagine we're hearing from our friends, from our loved ones, all about what's going on in Ukraine. And I think that to a lesser degree, Europe is getting that more and more as the refugees come all over Europe as well. And people start hearing the stories about artists, about regular business people, doctors, scientists who have to flee and have experienced horrific events and death and destruction on a scale we haven't seen in a long time. So yes, maybe some European countries are not doing as much as they could, but it's a shared burden. And that's one of the things that Canada is pushing, and NATO is as well, as is the EU, I should mention, of course.
It seems like that they're not doing enough, but is there a chance that regular people might not be seeing something that these kind of military people know and they're doing, but they cannot do on top of a surface so that everybody can see what's happening, but they're actually doing more than what we are seeing? Like, is there a chance of that? Because I personally think there has to be going something like that as well.
Yes, there's short answer. There is a lot going on, and it's again, it's trying to make sure that people see the help that is going to Ukraine in some circumstances, because when you see that your friend is giving, say you've got a friend of yours who's doing a marathon, and one of your relatives donates to it, you want to make sure everybody else knows, okay, well, I support this as well, so I'm going to donate too. It helps if people can see the help that's going to Ukraine. However, in some circumstances, especially for military aid or other information sharing, a couple of other things like that, technology, it might be useful that people do not see exactly what's happening, especially for Russia to not see that. So it's again, it's a challenging balancing act.
Yeah, that's what I guessed. I mean, it has to. Next question is that what Rasmussen said the other day. He said, "I think we should have done more to deter Putin. Back in 2008, he attacked Georgia, took de facto Abkhazia and South Ossetia. We could have received much more determinedly already in that time." What do you think about that? Like, he said basically that NATO and EU hasn't done enough in 2008, and they could have stopped. Maybe, do you think they could have stopped Russian further aggressions?
Yeah, not only that, in 2014 as well, the beginning of the invasion of Ukraine, and in response to the cyber attacks on Estonia earlier in 2007. It's hindsight is 2020, of course. It was a very different world at that time. This is before so many questions came up about the leadership of the West, as it were, and before the rise of China really became a big issue in politics. So I think that unequivocally, the West, NATO, the EU, everybody should have seen the invasion of Georgia as a cut and dried, obvious imperial grab by Mr. Putin. But in a lot of cases, politicians like to be blind if it does not work with the feelings of their citizens. So most citizens, to be frank, would not be able to point out Georgia or Moldova on a map. They frankly, before this war, they would not have been able to point out Ukraine on a map. Certainly that's the case for a lot of Americans and to a large degree Canadians as well. So I'm not that surprised. It's of course a failure, unequivocally, a failure of everything we believe in. Territorial integrity. You hear this thrown about all the time when we're talking about Ukraine. Why are we supporting Ukraine? It's because we want to maintain the idea of territorial integrity and that we are supporting democratic governments. And in that case, the same reasoning would have been there in 2008. And so definitely a failure. But again, hindsight is 2020. They thought that through negotiation, they could reason with Putin. Clearly now that just emboldened him. Very similar to the 1930s and the work up to the Second World War. But again, it's always hindsight is 2020. He's definitely right, but I don't know. There would not have been enough support for a strong response to the taking of South Ossetia and of Abkhazia. So
of course, but do you think that now, if they are looking back, and if we're looking at people are saying, that was a mistake. I mean, professionals in the field are feeling like that was a mistake. Do you think that now are they still like tiptoeing around Putin a little too much, maybe?
Could be. Yeah, I mean, but that's the problem, right? When you asked about the nuclear weapons, that is the problem. Okay, so is he bluffing? How likely is it that he's bluffing? Is it 2% chance that he would use nuclear weapons, or is it 40% chance if he feels really threatened? And I read so many great articles about how we are cowards for not being more forceful against Putin, for not actually being direct participants in the Ukrainian conflict. But we have a responsibility as well not to escalate. So when the escalation means that it would be a nuclear step potentially, it's not an insignificant point. And if NATO is charged with defending people, that's its main job. And if it's starting to poke too much, and the question is always what is too much, but it has to be more on the conservative side, to try to not make things worse, which is very easy to make things worse, I should add.
Yeah, he even though he said recently that he's fine with Ukraine getting these candidate status, like that they must, like, I can't see that. Like, he's fine with that, I can see. Well, I'll get to the next question, which is about candidate status, actually, that we possibly are not getting. I'm not sure, but the senses are kind of vibes around are that they are somehow giving candidate status to Ukraine and Moldova, but not Georgia, even though we were in the same
basket.
Yeah. So Ukrainians are ready to die for European perspective. These are the words of EU Commission President Ursula. And on that, I want to say that, like, isn't that a little unfair? I think that they are saying that Ukrainians are ready to die for European Union. First of all, they are dying for their country, and second, Georgians have shed lots of blood over the years, over a couple of wars, and we are kind of dooring between Europe and Russia and Asia, basically. So, like, do you think do you think they are making mistake, basically, or what do you think about this notion
that a mistake, not
to give
for candidate status? Well, again, it's they have to try to make a reasonable prediction as to how quickly or how well Georgia is going to be able to fulfill a membership action plan. And I remember so well in, say, 2008, 2009, just after the invasion, Georgia was doing very, very well on so many indicators as far as tackling corruption, ease of doing business. They were always very proud of that. In Canada, we were always receiving delegations mentioning how open Georgia was and that the administrative capacity of the government was improving. And so these are the messaging bullet points that have to come back again, I think. Things like going after previous heads of the government and imprisoning them always kind of sends a tough backsliding argument to those who are looking to include Georgia on the next step of joining the EU or NATO, for that matter. When it comes to a stable government, where you're not seeing vindictive back and forths between parties, you're seeing something a little more stable, something a little more centralized, civil. That's what they're looking for. I might add, though, in Canada, our own political discourse is becoming less civilized in that way. So it's not just a problem in Georgia. There's always this kind of ebb and flow, like a tide, of what is the current state of political discussion, discourse, and importantly, bureaucratic management of so many different issues and diplomatic management. And then the tough thing is that politicians can get power by backing very popular notions, which may not be good for the overall government, but it'll get them elected. And that's the problem with democracy. It's always messy in that way. We just hope that the greater good and the desire to do better for your own country will win out against that personal interest of each politician.
Listen, I was just gonna add that, like, we do have these certain politicians who go out and like talk to international figures and like talk badly about Georgia, basically because of their personal interests. And I think that is very damaging to us, because like most people in Georgia are ready for more European style, you know. We are definitely against certain very liberal stuff that you may well know, I'm not sure, but we have these three things that if you don't touch these three things, you are fine with Georgians, which is like our language, our soil, like land, and our faith. And if they don't touch these, we are good. We can be friends, and we are very tolerant, actually, if you don't touch these three. So we are nice people, basically what I'm trying to say. We have like mosques besides, I don't know, Georgian church and like so on. Maybe you know about this, I don't know. But we are pretty liberal in certain areas, and we are tolerant until they touch these three. But these Georgian politicians who are going around just bad-mouthing Georgia, against Georgian interests. I wish this just wasn't a case, but I guess all countries have it. We have short time left, but I did want to add a little bit that we actually we actually have a better situation in terms of corruption and many other indications that we should be getting these kind of status than Ukraine or Moldova, like, right? So, anyways, I just wanted to, I guess, voice this in case someone listens. So this is really important. This is actually the main reason why I want to talk to you. We have many political analysts here that are not actually political analysts, but they're spreading Russian propaganda really successfully. Spreading this notion that Europe or US or Canada or NATO does not care about us. Clearly, it's like 30 years. They are, dragging us. They're not giving anything. And like, obviously, right now, it seems that they are right. But do you think there is any chance that they might be wrong? And there might be something we are not seeing here, that NATO won't leave us alone against Russia again, or EU. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not representing NATO itself, but I'm enmeshed in the community, and the community has certainly found a great deal of steel since February 24th. Almost a rediscovery of the values that we hold dear. And Mr. Putin has obviously threatened just about everyone at this point, including Finland and Sweden, who are looking to join NATO, very likely, if not next week, then shortly. And the fact that NATO has a very rigorous entry scheme, if you will, the membership action plan, is, it's there for a reason. And NATO is not going to let people skip the line. Certainly, they're not letting Ukraine do that. I know they wouldn't let Georgia do that or Moldova, but the fact that NATO now has this new refound belief in itself and its mission to protect the West, as it were, I think that if there was further belligerence against Georgia, you would see a firmer response. Obviously not an attack against one is an attack against all. That is the whole basis of NATO itself, Article 5, so that if a NATO country is attacked, all the other NATO countries come to its aid. However, I think you would see a great deal more action than you did with the nothing, the no reaction in 2008. I think it would be a very different situation. The ties between Georgia and NATO have just been increasing continually. I see visits to Georgia all of the time by NATO functionaries and the Secretary General. We've also, of course, had a NATO office there for some time. Georgia just finished being part of a NATO practice, operation. So, I mean, Georgia continues to be as involved as possible in NATO exercises and operations, and I don't think it would be left behind. I can't tell you what the support would be if the South Ossetia border kept creeping forward in a new operation, but I can guarantee you it would not be the nothing that happened in 2008.
Yeah. Last question, quickly, is really kind of a little bit funny because you do not represent like an entire Canadian government, but like I still want to ask your opinion on it. Why do you think we do not have Canadian embassy in Georgia? Because Georgian people think that Canada is a friendly country. In fact, they love it somehow from afar. Mm-hmm. So why do you think we don't have still? We don't have it.
Yeah, it's a I'd say it's a failure of Canadian diplomatic politics that we do not have more embassies. There are many NATO countries that do not have Canadian embassies. Albania, for instance. It looks like the tide may be turning. We've just opened a new high commission in Rwanda, or we will be opening one in Rwanda. We will be creating an ambassador to the African Union. So I think that this is going to change because, especially with Zoom, so many people have realized you can't do diplomacy just on the phone or meeting once a week or something like that. An embassy, personal connections do so much. So I can't guarantee you there'll be a new embassy in Tbilisi, but who knows? It would be.
I mean, promise me at least that you lobby us in
exactly
wherever
always.
You can.
Always.
Okay, sure. I think that's like very comforting enough that you'll be lobbying us as much as you can. And lastly, I just want to thank you a lot for your time and invite you here unofficially as my friend if you want. You'll have lots of good time because my friend was just here from Toronto and she loved it. She's coming back next year, as she said. So official visits are not as fun as visiting me as a friend. So definitely. I'm inviting you in front of all my viewers, just for fun and just trolling in Georgia.
It would be an honor.
So that you know why we should be better partners, I guess.
Thank you so much, Natia.
Okay, thank you.
Be well.